r/AskReddit. What was your high school's tragedy? A girl in my year, but not my school, started coming to my youth group. After a few weeks she confided in us. She had a lot of mental health issues, was on many medications, had numerous suicide attempts in her past, and was just struggling with life in general. It slowly came out that she had been molested by her uncle for years, and he had messed her up so much she was just a shell of a person. Our youth group didn't meet over school holidays, so we had a 2-week break where we didn't see her. I remember so clearly the Sunday night my mum picked me up from my part-time job to take me to youth group. She told me that my friend had attempted suicide earlier in the week. She had been found by her parents, but by the time they had her stomach pumped she was already brain dead. They had turned her life support off this morning. It was so brutal. She had been bullied so much by the bitchy girls at her school. It was an absolute disgrace watching them all fall apart at her funeral. They acted like it was such a tragedy, but they couldn't have cared less when she was alive and struggling. It was like it was a game or something to win. Who was closer with her? Who had more classes with her? It was sickening. Even 13 years later, I can't let that go, and I think about her often. I hope she found some kind of peace. I miss you, Sarah. I went to a school with an enrollment of about 1200 for grades 9 to 12, so not big but not small. We had 3 tragedies my freshman year. Luckily, there were no more during the rest of my HS. First, a very popular and well-liked senior died in a texting and driving accident. I had never met her, but the Friday before she died she was trying to run in heels to class and lost a shoe. I picked it up and gave it to her, and she thanked me with a big smile. Sad day the next week. Not long after, a junior attempted suicide over a girl he was having a rough patch with. He was a redneck kind of guy, but nice with lots of energy and a good disposition overall. He shot himself through the mouth with a .22 caliber rifle, commonly used for targets or squirrel hunting, in his truck, at church, with a service going on inside. The girl was attending that service. He survived but was left a shell of his former self. He's got the mindset of a small child. He lives with his parents, has a pony that he adores, and a children at play sign by the road in front of his home, though he is an only child. He's 27. Finally, most personal to me, a freshman classmate was shot by his stepdad through the heart while attempting to shield his mother from the stepdad's rage. They'd had a fight, and my friend ushered his 3 brothers out a window before trying to intervene. He died almost immediately. The stepdad, who is now in prison, then killed his mom as she ran out the door. R.I.P. J. Mayus. Hell of a man for a 14-year-old. During my freshman year, our much-loved superintendent was convicted of embezzlement. Another freshman tidbit, the eldest brother of a family of 4 kids, was convicted of raping and murdering a woman, and then dumped her body in a dumpster behind the local mart. My sophomore year I watched a dumbass kid try and psyche out a car by pretending to jump in front of it. He proceeded to follow through and was struck by the car driving just in front of me. I've never seen my mom move so fast to get out of a car in my life. The kid survived, but with serious cranial injuries and partial paralysis. Another from sophomore year, social studies teacher, had been working for the school for almost 20 years. Large man riddled with health issues and was paralyzed from the thighs down, died from iodine intoxication. He was on vacation with his wife and visited the all-you-can-eat seafood buffet 2 to 3 times a day. That, in conjunction with his already poor health and cocktail of medications, sadly killed him. My junior year there were 2 suicides, multiple bomb threats, vandalism, lunchroom riot. Senior year, friend of a friend plays hockey from school with a group of people. Discover loaded gun at the house of whomever they were hanging out with. Starts fucking around, as idiots do, and shoots our classmate in the face. 2 more suicides stem from this incident. I graduated high school in 2003, and every single year since then, there have been no less than 2 people I had known personally that have died. Maybe 3 to 4, if those deaths were illnesses, but almost all of the others were suicide or drug related. On my first day of high school, a kid brought an arsenal of guns to school in his car. He was called into the principal's office because of a tip from another student and was arrested after they searched his car. I had personally met him a couple of weeks before at the all 2 weeks of preschool marching band practices. held at the school. I had seen no warning signs. He was smart and played multiple instruments better than I played my own, and I think he wanted to go to West Point. But others did see warning signs, and those warning signs were ignored. The story I've heard is that the tip from another student that got his car searched had actually been filed during the preschool band practices when the student noticed the arsenal of guns in his car. The authorities said they couldn't do anything until school was actually in session. So he had brought an arsenal of guns he could have used against 200 helpless teens for 2 weeks, but the authorities ignored the warning. When he was caught, his excuse was that he was afraid a Columbine-style incident would happen at our school and he wanted to be prepared to stop/prevent it. I never bought that either. He was sentenced to a few months of boot camp, a few months in a detention center, and years of probation. I'm not sure if he got the mental health services he needed. I never really understood the situation until recently. I had heard of Columbine, and I guess I understood what it meant for someone to shoot up a school, but I don't remember feeling terror at the time. After seeing the videos from inside your school and seeing what could have happened to me and the people I know, I'm truly terrified and angry that this can happen in this country at any time, in any place. I really hope that you and your community can truly heal. I really hope this can be the last time this happens in the country. In my sophomore year of high school, 2012, I meet this lovely person by the name of Catalin in my English class, and we hit it off instantly being paired for an assignment. She pretty much was everything that I could like from a person at that time. She listened to weird music, she was fond of skateboarding, and she was a runner. Talking and joking the entire time, and not even focused on the actual work. I definitely felt I found my best friend. Fast forwarding many months later, we became as close as two people can be. After school we'd run, listen to music sharing our earphones together, often listening to our favorite band at that time, Beach Fossils, and sometimes grab a bite to eat and just hang. Well, one day I finally asked her if she would like to maybe start dating, and if she wanted to be my girlfriend. She said yes, and we shared a kiss to seal the deal. Just one day of starting our relationship, I find out that same night she had killed herself. She took a bunch of pills and slit her wrist while taking a bath. Finding out about that news the next morning, I wanted to throw up and felt a sense of dread. My life felt close to being completely empty, and like a void emerged. The entire time I thought I knew her, I found out she was a schizophrenic and didn't even mention it once to me. I don't know why she killed herself or ever found out. She was always eccentric, but I never could have guessed she suffered from such a mental illness. Though when you grow older and understand severe mental illness is like that, I can only imagine the torture she must have dealt with every day. But to not even let me share that burden with her was what hurt the most. I didn't care what defects were with her, and I was happy for who she was, though I wished she only valued her life as much as I did. Going on 7 years later, and I'm still haunted by her beautiful face when I reminiscent on a past life. Just those moments you share with a person when you sneak beer on a cool autumn night to drink and look at the stars above and just genuinely talk. It's unforgettable. Here's to hoping you're at peace now, Catalin, and you have a sound mind we all deserve. The stretch of Highway 401 between my hometown and Windsor was nicknamed Death Alley during my senior year. It seemed every few days there was a traffic fatality on that 80-kilometer stretch of road. There was a girl in my senior class who was one of those hot girls, but with substance. She was smart and she was selfless. She volunteered her time with the special needs children in our school and was going to university next year on a scholarship to become a special needs teacher. Sadly, she got into a car with her friend and an idiot. The story goes that she was taking a nap in the back seat, so she wasn't wearing a seatbelt. The driver lost control of his vehicle. We think he hit the rumble strip at a high speed and overcorrected too quickly. The car crashed into the guardrail on the other side of the highway and was totaled. He walked away. The friend in the passenger seat was in the hospital for a long time. Weeks at least, maybe months. And she died at the scene. The police would later say that given the tire marks and the damage, there was no way that car was going slower than 140 km/h. That's 40 above the limit. Since she was so nice and liked, everyone in our senior class was affected by this death. Sad thing is, I think she really could have made an impact on the world, at least wherever she choose to go. Now we'll never know. Don't speed. Wear a seatbelt. Ray got drunk and stole a car. He showed up after a local show and picked up Tony, Ashley, and Kyle. I think their names were Ashley and Kyle. I only knew Tony and Ray. Anyway, a cop tries to pull them over and Ray books it. He's doing something like 60 miles an hour in a 35 zone, hits the curb, catches some air, and slams the car into a brick wall. Ashley and Tony were killed. Kyle survives, but he's out for a while, and when he comes back he's in a wheelchair with a broken leg or two. I think he made a fullish recovery. Ray goes through the windshield and is just fine. He runs and hides in the bushes. Some dogs found him. Ray was an asshole. I never liked that dude, though I guess some people did. Everyone, and I mean everyone, loved Tony. His death was felt all over the county. I hadn't hung out with him much recently, but he was one of my best friends in elementary school, and he spent all summer, every summer, playing basketball at the local pool. I don't really know what Ashley's deal was. She might have been new in town or something. I didn't hear so much about her. When Kyle got back to school, he was an instant celebrity. I never really met him, but I sure knew who he was after that. The wheelchair and cast sure made him stand out. He seemed to be in surprisingly good spirits, all things considered. In conclusion, Ray, if you're reading this, I still hate your fucking guts. Just so we are clear. The year of death is how I think of it personally. It's my sophomore year, about March, just getting out of winter. I hear a few things about a senior who left school because he was diagnosed with leukemia, but I didn't know him, so I didn't keep up. It hits May, and he dies. He was an athlete, so a lot of people knew him, and being so close to graduation, it was especially hard. Over the summer, an upcoming senior gets fatally shot by a stray bullet in a gang shooting. I know even less about her, and didn't have school in session to learn more, but she was apparently a really hard-working student, and was walking home from her job. November rolls around. I'm in my school's dramatic unit, and one of the instructors doesn't show for the Veterans Day ceremony. No call, no nothing. This is one of the big events of the year, local veterans and politicians, ECT, and this was the senior instructor, very well respected in the community. The ceremony finishes. The other drot instructors are deflecting when students ask about the missing teacher, and at the end of the day, they call all the drot students to the auditorium. A few months earlier, a cadet walked to school with a girl who was nearly kidnapped. A different story, but they called everyone to commend that guy. We thought it was something similar. Instead, the principal breaks down crying, telling us the instructor had committed suicide. Lit himself on fire in a park that morning. This instructor played a very big role in students' lives as a mentor and an advocate, and so everyone is devastated. I don't remember exactly when, but around this time a middle schooler committed suicide. He was bullied for a long time, apparently. January. My friend and I go to a diner. We see a kid from school there. He's one of those class clowns that is nice to everyone and kind of full of himself, but he genuinely knows how to make people around him laugh. The next day at school, first thing, they call all seniors to the auditorium. Not uncommon. Maybe they want to talk about graduation or something related. The thing that was weird is that my teacher didn't know what it was about, and usually they know if there will be an assembly. So I find the same friend from the day before, and we share the uncomfortable observation of all the social workers and administration standing around, just like with the drot instructor from a few months earlier. Turns out the kid we had seen just yesterday had died. After the diner, he went racing down the highway with his friends, lost control of his car around a bend. He was dead before his car stopped at the third tree it hit. TLDR 1 year, 5 deaths, 1 by cancer, 1 shot, 1 car accident, 2 suicides. It was midway into first period. We can hear clamoring and shouting coming from out in the halls. The teacher gets up to see what's going on, then comes back in and keeps us all in class even when the bell rings. Enough students had gotten texts or other messages to know what was going on. A student had doused himself in gasoline at the back of the parking lot and lit himself on fire. He ran towards the school screaming and flailing, where a number of students and teachers who could witness this from their room immediately ran to help. They managed to extinguish the flames, and he was rushed to a burn center, but he didn't survive. It was beyond traumatizing for the people who witnessed it, and especially so for those who rushed to the scene firsthand. We had psychologists and therapists at the school for about a month for people to talk to. There were reports of students being unable to sleep or shower, seeing a burnt body whenever they pulled back the curtains or closed their eyes. I'm thankful I didn't witness it, but was heartbroken when it happened. The student had apparently been depressed and had a number of physical ailments that gave him an early death sentence. He had already surpassed his expected survival by several years, but the effects became too overwhelming for him. The perspective we were presented with was that he was freeing himself from his current suffering, but this doesn't explain why he chose to go out the way he did. That's something I don't think any of those affected will find out. It was right after graduation, but affected the whole school it seemed like, except the freshmen. I'll tell it from my point of view. Tuesday night, I have 5 people whom I call family that are not actually related. Eric is one of them. On that night, Eric and I were supposed to go to an EMT class we were enrolled in, but neither of us could shake the feeling that we desperately needed to find a friend we hadn't seen in a while. We went looking for our friend Andy, but ended up finding Richard and Jeff instead. We decided to hang out and got a half gallon of Old Crow bourbon. Not much more than that, except that I got really pissed. I drank 15 shots and didn't even catch a bus, not one single bit. Jeff and Richard left after a bit, and around 11, Eric, who was sloshed, and I, stone cold sober, went to sleep. Wednesday morning 8:30 am, someone began knocking on the door to the house we called the heroin den because of the damage the tweakers who lived there before us had done. I woke up as I didn't live there anymore and was on the couch. At the door was Eric's brother asking us had we heard about Cassie and Daniel. That's when he tells us that Cassie is dead and Daniel is really hurt from a car accident. After some confusion, we learned that it wasn't Cassie's brother Daniel, but another kid with that name. We also found out there were 2 other people in the car, one injured, one dead. We immediately go to the school to check on a friend of ours who we were worried about. When we get there, the place was insane. Groups of kids crying, hugging, and comforting each other. It turns out that Cassie is very popular in the school, something I hadn't known. Fast forward to her funeral. I have been to a lot of funerals. My birthday seemed to kill people for like 7 years. But I hadn't seen one funeral this big. It had been for my brother, and he didn't deserve it. 3 was no church service, only graveside. That was to accommodate the fact that our entire graduating class and most often sophomores, juniors, and seniors from the school had come. There were people there and didn't know she even knew. But that was Cassie, the greatest person I've ever met. When I first met Cassie, she was a bitch. I hated her guts, but a few years later, after a funny happenstance, which I'll tell if you want to hear, she became one of my best friends. She cried in my shoulder. She was the person that taught me how to be around girls. I was the only person she trusted to drive her car. She was my inspiration for moving from my hometown and doing something with my life. When I found out early senior year I was going to be a father, she was the first person I told, and she kicked my ass for being dumb. And then she told me to step and be a dad. After high school ended, we got busy with work and with life. We hadn't seen each other in a couple months and she came to the den to pick up something. We ended up giving her a ride home. The last thing she said to me, I love you prod, and although I know she meant it platonically, the sincerity and shock of it got to me, and I didn't know how to respond. I wish I had, because 3 weeks later she was dead. TL, doctor, close friends dies, 3/4 of the school shows up to her funeral. Just graduated last year. We had 3 kids commit suicide, separately, all within 3 months of my first semester senior year. It depressed everybody, and my school has had so many cases of mental health crisis since then. It's scary and unnatural. Butterfly effect is fucking crazy. I was 50 and I knew dozens of other kids, either my age or a year younger, who were also. We all take everything so seriously when we are younger, and I seriously think that social media contributes so much to all of this. It's social depression now. Why do I have to grow up in this age where kids who just got their driver's license are taking their own lives over something so unimportant. Think about it. Twitter, one of the top social platforms, allows users to browse likes of other users. Not really a big deal, right? Nah, not for some people. Younger people are curious and wanna see what their friends are up to and what they like. Take it a step further, that's a perfect recipe for someone at risk for mental health. For example, take a socially awkward boy who has a crush on this girl. He stalks her profile, sees she liked something about another guy at his school, and it's instant jealousy for him. I don't think it's just fear of missing out that causes depression from social media, is the fact you can tell so much about a person just looking at their profile, and they either get disappointed or jealous if they find something they don't agree with. Also, I laugh hard when someone talked about how many followers they had, or try to get more and more followers. It's an addiction that has little benefit and people abuse social media so much. I unfortunately have two. Clarification: I lived in a small town and the school district was very small and close, so something that happened at one school happened at another sort of thing. My sister is about 3 years younger than me, and when I was like a sophomore a pretty bad drunk driving accident happened. Now my town had a pretty bad underage drinking problem, and unfortunately accidents like this, while not common, didn't surprise many. Most were not fatal though. So there was a truck full of kids, most in high school, one not, that were driving home from a party and the driver was drunk. He missed a very hard turn and went barreling over the edge and smashed through mobile home. Thankfully the bedroom where the owners were on the other side and were able to get out. When it collided, the car caught fire and everyone escaped, except the 13 to 14-year-old girl in the back. The girl my sister knew and went to school with. The worst was the girl did not die on impact and could be heard in the background of the 911 call. I will never forgive local media for releasing the 911 call. I cannot describe the look in my sister's eyes while I tried to comfort her after she, a 13-year-old child, heard her friend being burned alive. It was soul crushing. No one wants to see their younger sibling in that much pain. A kid in my grade randomly one night took a gun from his grandfather and shot his mother and his sister. This was a kid that, while I didn't really know him, was still very familiar to me. When I started my freshman year I was the new kid in town and tried to make friends with all my classmates. He was in a few of my classes and we were classroom acquaintances. Not really friends, but we talk in class and be friendly. He was normal but quiet, but I wouldn't say creepy. I stopped seeing him later on and didn't think much of it cause I dropped from pre-app classes to regular, and he was extremely smart. I found out after the shooting his mom took him out and was homeschooling him. I lived in a country town, so that's fairly normal. The most unsettling part is to this day there is no explanation. There was no signs of mental illness and still aren't. There was no abuse. Usually if there is, the investigation can find hints or suspicions at the least, but nothing. There was no aggression. The 911 call was extremely calm and he has given no explanation as of yet. It's hard to think back to the person I would see every day and connect him to this. I understand these didn't happen exactly at school, but at that age school is pretty much your life, and all collectively as a student body we felt and were affected by these tragedies. They were our peers being affected. Oh boy, is this a doozy. So we had the most open and outspoken gay student hang himself semi-publicly. So this guy was a rockstar on the surface. He was gay, and bullying seemed to bounce right off him. It got to the point where nobody really messed with him because it was useless to try and bully him. So when this poor kid kills himself, the school goes on a whole campaign about bullying and how someone may seem fine, but they are hurting, etc. The school is pretty open to it, and things start getting a lot better in terms of cliques and other social and bullying type things. Here's a problem. Kid didn't kill himself because of bullying. He was sleeping with an adult parent from the school and things got dark and out of hand. So the school is in a tough spot. Things are getting better based on what was really an assumption / straight up lie by the administration. The parents of this kid are super conflicted because they want to publicly lynch, figuratively, but in terms of an adult fucking a child then blackmailing them into suicide, I'm open to the concept of public execution. But enough of my soapbox. This fucking parent, they can't really do much in public because now the administration wants to save face. It turned into a shit show. On top of that, you had people who are so dedicated to their political and LGBT stances that they just decided that the fabricated story was the truth because they realized the real story made the one openly gay kid at the school look pretty bad. Regardless of your stance on the issue, that's some seriously fucked up revisionist shit right there. I hate to draw political lines, but you've got liberal activist teachers, and this is California, so it's basically all the teachers freaking the fuck out and deciding the real story, as told by the parents of the dead kid, is hate speech blah blah blah. So now the parents of this dead gay kid are being called the bad guys and homophobic etc. because the narrative put out by the school is far preferable. In their mind, all of this is going on behind the scenes. Kids are kept in the dark about what's going on. This makes sense, but then you've got parents telling some of the kids different versions of the story and basically everything reverts to the same old story after a month. Technically both these incidents happened the summer between 8th grade and freshman year of high school, but they painted the picture of how our entire vibe was, especially the kids from my town. My high school was small, less than 300 people, 50 some in my graduating class, and that was with 5 towns going to one high school. So as you can guess, this was a rural area. Both these things happened in my town, and, in fact, on the long country lane I grew up on. The first involved a girl my age I'd grown up with. I remember as a little kid my aunt would babysit her along with us a lot of times. One night her dad, drunk as usual, fighting with her mom as usual, grabbed one of his guns and blew his brains out right in front of her and her mom. She was a different person in some ways in high school, liked to party, but never anything harder than acid or shrooms. She always kept her core of just being an awesome, chill person, though, and everyone from the super popular kids to the library geeks could count her as a friend. After graduation she moved out west to play guitar in clubs and stuff. Good on her. The second is really messed up, and keep in mind these incidents happened within a couple months of each other. On the other end of this long lane there was a single father with 2 sons. The older was my age, the younger my brother's age, 2 years younger. The guy was the worst kind of abusive drunk and everyone knew it. He'd beat his sons, especially the younger one. One day he beat the younger one really badly, repeatedly kicking him in the abdomen once he fell to the ground, over something like leaving a shed unlocked. The older son tried to get him to take the younger one to the hospital, but of course he just kept drinking. The younger kid writhed in agony on the couch for hours before going unconscious and never waking up. Ruptured intestines or spleen or something. Absolutely tragic. You might be asking yourself right now, why didn't someone do something? And that's where the most messed up part of the story comes in. There had been dozens of complaints to the state's DHHS department and they hadn't done a thing. And the local hillbilly cops are beyond useless. This along with a couple other high profile incidents led to a big scandal in my state's DHHS system in the 90s. Among other things, it was found they were erroneously reporting cases investigated and closed when they hadn't even gone to the area, in most cases, like this one, because they didn't want to be bothered to send any caseworkers to the rural parts of the state. The last one was in high school. I was a junior and this happened to a girl that was a senior. She was with her boyfriend, mid-20s asshole, no shock there one night and it was really snowy. He was blitzed out of his mind on booze and cocaine and went off the road just past the turn of this aforementioned country lane I lived on and plowed into these boulders off the side of the road. He was mostly fine. She didn't make it. Worst thing was, I happened to pick up her good friend the next morning to go to breakfast at this local family restaurant with some other people. Friend in question lived next door to where that boy's father killed him a few years prior, and we drove past the wreck. That looks really bad, she said ominously. Half hour later I'm catching her from fainting as she bawls inconsolably when her mom called her at the restaurant to tell her the news. Also, apparently it came out that the douchebag boyfriend had wandered away from the accident scene and didn't even attempt to get help. It wasn't until some fisherman on his way to work a couple hours later drove by or something that it was reported. Every year, we had at least 1 or 2 students get in a real bad mortal car accident in the same area in the dead of winter. Incidentally enough, I was the last student to get in a major accident in that area. I was speeding by at least over 30 in a 40 trying to get to my midterms and was going to be late unless I gunned it. Unbeknownst to me, I thought the roads were all clear. However, it turned out at a certain infamous curved turn, there was a large patch of black ice. When I hit that patch, I immediately felt the lack of control in my hands. I was already in high concentration mode and was taking this in strides without really realizing the danger I was in. I tried to regain control by turning into the slide, but I think the speed at which I was going made this more difficult than it usually should be. Of course, I was also tapping the brakes to try and let off on my speed. It seemed to be working, but not fast enough. My mind finally allowed me to see beyond what I was actively trying to do. And that was the sight of several cars off in the distance coming my way. At this point, I was still swerving between the two lanes and wasn't sure if I could safely get the car under control in time. So, without really thinking the thing through, still going around 50 here, I used every last ounce of control that I had to direct myself off the road and into a ditch. I would like to attribute this action to my selfless intention, but I wasn't really thinking. You see, I was passively taking in all the details while simultaneously maneuvering my red Ford Escape from the clutches of calamity. As it was, I moved again on instinct and the cold emotionless state of mind I was in and drove my car into the ditch on the left side of the road. What I didn't realize about this decision was the fact that the ditch would also act as a kind of jump for my car, which launched me back into the road inverted. The force in which I landed caused me to roll several times into the other side of the road and into the field. The car somehow managed to stay upright when it finally came to a stop, but it would never run again. I opened my eyes and realized I was still alive. I reflected on how slow everything went in those final moments and how I accepted my fate before blacking out momentarily when I hit my head mid-roll. This happened for a brief moment or two when I realized that cars were pulling up around me and I needed to let everyone know I was still alive. But more than that, I was barely scratched minus a welt on my head. I unbuckled my seatbelt, opened the still working door, and exited my favorite red Ford Escape for the last time. Hands up with a shit-eating grin, I informed the meager crowd that I was gonna be okay, and thus, the curse was lifted at least until next year. The first one was when one of my friends left school with a pain in his chest. The next day his twin brother stated the doctor suspected it was pneumonia. But then next week he gathered his brother's closest friends and told them that he has been diagnosed with cancer. After 2 years of treatment, he eventually went to remission and we began to help return to a normal life. When most of us were away at college, he had pretty bad relapse and didn't make it. Our group hasn't been the same without him. The next was happened during football team's afternoon practice. From what I heard, one of our tall players, about 6 feet 4 inches, tackled a smaller player, probably about 5'8" inches, to the ground. The entire team saw the tackle and said it was a fairly weak tackle, just enough to knock him down, and both players were in full pads. When the taller came around to help him up, the smaller guy was just laying there not moving and barely breathing. An ambulance is called and he is taken to the hospital, but he doesn't make it. The taller player is destroyed by the news. The whole school does everything they can support, so he doesn't blame himself. It truly was a freak accident. The taller eventually went to an out-of-state university and he is having successful collegiate football career there. The fallen player's jersey and number were retired from our school's roster and it hangs in the front office as a memorial. Another happened my senior year and affected the entire school. We had an amazing art teacher. She inspired a lot of us to keep pursuing art of any form in our free time. She was supportive of our different styles and worked closely with other student-operated departments, yearbook, graphic media, etc. She even brought her year 3 art students and app art students gifts back from Beijing. One day she didn't come into class and we thought nothing of it. After a couple days with substitutes, a neighbor checks her house to discover that her ex-husband went there to murder her and kill himself. It came as a shock to the whole school and devastated the art students, myself included. We mourned her for the rest of the semester and we